Like I said, there's about 450 cases. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's a horrendous injury. I mean, you're taking, the population of the babies down to the preemies, down to the preemies, who then get NEC and have, well, actually, if you get NEC, it is horrendous. And then people who are willing to litigate, who are willing to contact an attorney, because again, when you lose a baby, this is very, very devastating. And I've had clients with all types of injury who just said, I'm just not litigious, and I don't want to get up on this on the stand and have to talk about my hip replacement. Well, can you imagine getting up and talking about losing your baby? Yeah. Then other people too feel almost the opposite, where they're like, I want justice for my baby. I want I want other people to know. I want to protect other babies. I want to make sure that this stops.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back. Another week, another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. How you doing? How you feeling? How's your weekend?
All good. Happy to be here. Happy to see you and the Brunster, little Bruno. I actually feel great today. I've been in this whole process of redoing the living room for quite a while, and I had ordered a couch like 3 months ago, which finally showed up today.
Wow.
Yep. So I'm pretty excited about that. The only last touch is I have a painting that is actually commissioned from a friend of mine who lives down in Sonoyta, so I could pick like the colors, and I'm going to put that up where there's Leroy Neiman boxing prints are. So it used to be all just dark and heavy. Yeah. Looking. And then, I'd had it for like 12 years, so it was just time.
I think dark and heavy is a little dramatic. Yes, it was darker tones, but it wasn't like the room was painted black or anything. It was still it was very earthy. I would argue it's more earthy.
Yeah, but like dark browns, and the rug was brown with some pattern in it. And that was like 12 years ago. That was more the thing. Now everything's like light and bright, and just I want to have a light and bright attitude. So I think my surroundings will help
fair.
with that.
That is fair. I'm a strong believer in setting up your atmosphere. When you wake up, especially when the atmosphere you wake up in is very important. But I didn't realize that living room trends or living room themes change so frequently. You said 12 years ago that was the trend, but now at 12 years, you looked like a fool. What? Right?
I'm so out of style.
You're out
it
of
was
style.
Embarrassing.
Humiliating. I can't believe you'd even bring people over.
I didn't. And we didn't spend much time in there.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, think about like kitchens, like back when they had the old avocado green, and then everything had to be like, the white appliances, and then everything had to be, the stainless
marble
steel. And so things have changed.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
I guess that's true. I feel like now that I think about it more, it almost goes down like tiers where, like, for example, marble is like really nice. If you have marble countertops, wow, you're loaded, you're bougie, you're living the lifestyle. But then all of a sudden it turned into where that was the norm. And then like in college, when I moved into places, I had marble countertops. They weren't actually marble. Usually,
big marble look.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I feel like that's how it goes. It's like there's like a bougie look that is super expensive, and then they find a way to make it look cheaper, and then all of a sudden, college kids that are like looking for the cheapest housing available have the same countertops as the house on top of the mountain.
Except not the cheapest housing available. Believe me, there was cheaper housing than you were in.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, very fair.
Yeah.
But that's very exciting. I did check out the couch. It looks fantastic. I like the lighter colors. I'm a strong believer in it. I think it's a little risky with dogs.
Yeah. Somehow it looks lighter now that it's here than it did at the store.
Yeah, it's white.
Well, it's not white. It's cream,
white.
But it's a very thick material. And so before I had this leather stuff, and the dogs just scratched the crap out of it. Mm-hmm. So we do have like a very heavy fabric down in Sonoyta, which is holding up pretty well. It's been about 2 years, but it's also a darker color. It's like a blue.
Yeah.
So, I'll have to be a little bit careful with it. But my new theory, too, is that when I was looking, I was like, I'm not going to go get the most expensive, fanciest couch because I have dogs.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting a couch that's going to last for 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. This other one lasted, well, actually more than 12 because it was at the old house.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Before I moved over here.
Value out of that.
I get insane value out of that one. But, since the dogs showed up, 2020 and 2021.
Showed up at your door knocking.
COVID dogs.
Cold.
They were like...
Puppies in the rain.
It's a pandemic. We need a home.
Yeah.
You need dogs. So things change, and the quality of your furnishings necessarily change.
Yeah.
But they're worth it. They're worth it. So we'll see. Yeah. I mean, it's a little lighter than I thought. I don't know. Well,
It's all right. I mean, I think it looks very good. I think it looks very nice, and I think it will be all right with the dogs. I mean, they're not. It's not like they're super dirty per se. You know, they're more just destructive at times. But it looks like a very thick, durable couch.
it is. It just may have to be cleaned. I mean, what I was thinking is like if it's muddy and wet outside, maybe we won't be going into the living room.
Yeah, just put up the fence.
Yeah, I would be bringing the fence back.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes, well, tell us what's happening with you, Christina, Phoenix.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I know you were at a wedding.
I did have a wedding. Had a pretty good weekend, actually. Nothing Friday. Saturday morning, woke up, and it was kind of like a what holiday was it? St. Patrick's Day. It was like a pre-St. Patrick's Day. Saturday, people started celebrating. We had a wedding at 4 o'clock, but that's kind of late for a wedding. You got to pregame the wedding.
It's either late or early, but it's kind of weirdly midday.
So we went out to Drunk Monk, which is one of our regular bottomless mimosa spots, and we met some of Christina's coworkers out there. Fantastic time, good people. Joked around with them, got pretty buzzed, went home, quickly changed, went to the wedding, showed up. I didn't know whose wedding it was. I didn't know very many people there, very few. It was Christina's high school friend who they're not really friends with anymore. They were best friends in elementary school, but then had beef, and then were friends in middle school, and then had beef. I don't know. Chaos in the friendship group and whatnot. But essentially, Christina guilt-tripped them into getting us 2 seats at their wedding. And it was a fantastic time. I mean, I think they're our age, and it's the first time I've been to a wedding of someone my age, and I think it's almost a little surreal where it's like, wow, we really are at this time in our life. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 25, 26, that's, people... Well, some people get married even younger than that.
That's absurd. Well, honestly, I mean, getting married early, I think that's understandable. I think what's crazy is when, I've had some high school and college friends already have kids, and that's crazy to me because, and they're very happy, right? That's their goal.
They wanted to do that.
They wanted to do that, but it's just, for me, it's I couldn't handle that responsibility. It's crazy thinking someone else at my age can. They're just that much more responsible.
It's a lot, for sure, at whatever age.
Yeah, I know. I said I haven't, wasn't really drinking. And this is the first time I've really had a drinking outing since New Year's, I think, because I don't drink during the week. No, don't really see a point. Been trying to keep off that. And then, like I said, me and Christina used to just at home, you're watching a movie, you might as well have a bottle of wine. Oh, it's only 8 p.m. and you still have another bottle of wine left. Might as well go through 2. Okay, 3. So, I've been cutting back a little bit. It was a great time, though. It was nice. I don't know. It felt like a very, I don't know what the words is. Not like a college weekend, but it's been a while since I had kind of a degenerate weekend. So it was good.
Yeah, I got it out of your system. Well, so how have you been feeling physically? Have you noticed a difference when you're not drinking as much during the week, or?
A little bit. I mostly feel it early in the week, Monday, Tuesday. I think I would always feel Sundays are now a day that exists because it didn't exist when I would drink on Saturday.
Yeah.
And then Monday was kind of the drag over, leak over from Sunday. If I didn't, I was still feeling kind of shitty and still not mentally fully there. Definitely feel sharper. I don't know. It's nothing massive. I've also been going to the gym. There's been a lot of moving pieces too. So I don't know if it's necessarily just the not drinking. Or the other aspects of life we've been trying to improve on.
Although when you're not drinking, it's a lot easier to have the energy to go to the gym. So they kind of, fit in there.
Well, and then I'm watching my eating too, with
That's
calories
true,
and
too.
whatnot, and drinking just demolishes calories.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then you have to eat crappy food for medicinal purposes to feel better the next day. And that was always my excuse. So.
I love that medicinal purposes.
Well, that was my justification, because normally I would never eat a big old greasy hamburger or pizza or something like that. But you're like, oh, I really feel like crap, and it's the only thing that's going to cure me, help me feel better with a hangover. So, I mean, since quitting drinking, I have had very little of that type of food.
Yeah. Weekend was good though. Sunday, back to the old days of just recuperating all day Sunday, and then just back to the grind this week. Nothing too crazy. Feeling a little under the weather, but power through. I didn't want to leave our listeners' podcast list.
No, that would be actually cruel and unusual punishment.
Arguably criminal.
Arguably.
Anyways, we should probably just hop into this show.
Yes, let's hop in.
You want to start with updates on cases?
Yeah, I do. And the first thing that I want to talk about is and this is the one thing. So, and actually, just for the listeners, Ben doesn't ever know what we're going to talk about before we start. And people are always surprised when I tell them that. They're like, what? He seems so prepared. I'm like, no, he has absolutely no idea. He doesn't know the topics, nothing. Shows up, does his fabulous intro, and then, he just responds, just kind of bats the ball back. And but this time I did give him a little heads up because on the last show we talked about Monsanto and Bayer, and I had said, what do you think they're doing? And the first thing he said was Texas two-step. I said, no, they're not. Well, sure enough, this week an article came out that they are now considering the Texas two-step. And I was like, man, this guy, I mean, he
called it. What can I say?
Yeah, you called it. I mean, you know how these drug companies think. But yeah, so interesting because the other companies that have tried this have not been successful. So we've talked a lot about the Johnson Johnson trying to use the Texas two-step to avoid paying for the talc, ovarian cancer, and mesothelioma cases. And then also 3M tried to do it with regard to those military earplugs.
Yeah.
We're not successful, but they're considering it. They've let the cat out of the bag on that. And again, the Texas two-step is this whole process where they basically separate, they set up a division that's going to have the obligations for some, big wrongdoing. In this case, Roundup and the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cases. So they have assets in their other entity, and then they try to have this division go bankrupt. And, it's just really outrageous. The reason it hasn't been successful in the past is that courts are looking at this and saying, wait, this is not what bankruptcy is for. Bankruptcy is for companies that are in financial distress. You're not in financial distress. This is like a game.
Yeah. Literally a game. I mean, that's you kind of get the sense of a game. Texas two-step. They're
like
dancing
a dance.
around.
They're dancing around.
They're
exactly.
having fun because I mean, it's insane. I mean, bankruptcy, and we've gone into this pretty in depth. Is that bankruptcy is intended if you cannot pay off your debts, if you do not have any money. But what they're doing is completely. Arguably kind of bending the law. Like I almost think of it as a surgery where they're like cutting out this cancerous tumor in their company that is hemorrhaging money for them because they've obviously done something wrong, and they just want to cut it out and just act like it's nothing happened. Oh, okay, we're all good. It's out of the company, but it's not fair. It's not legal, and it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's like cutting off a leg to save the body or something like that.
So
but
you did mention that they announced that they were considering it. Is this something where they haven't actually attempted it? They haven't filed the Texas two-step? And if they are announcing it, what's the point? Like, do they call a news station and say, hey, we're considering this, guys?
But actually, they haven't announced it. But, they have these shareholders meetings, and basically word gets out.
Okay,
and so
it gets leaked.
It's basically leaked, yes. I mean, not that it was secret, because their stock has dropped dramatically. I mean, I think we talked about it like by 70% since all of these cases have started happening. So they're trying to figure out a way to stop the bleeding, like you said. And the reality is that it probably won't be successful because the others haven't. But what it will be successful at is delay. Because when they file the bankruptcy, you have to go through the whole court process to determine whether or not it can go forward. And that, I mean, we saw what happened with J&J. I mean, it literally delayed it by years.
Yeah.
And again, these are similar to the talc cases in that it's a cancer that's killing people. And when you put these 2-3 year delays on the resolution of their claims, a lot of people don't survive to get their day in court.
And it's disgusting because that's their intention.
It's disgusting.
Like that, to a certain extent, that is, they have that in mind when they're making, it's not something where it's like, well, we genuinely do think we can do this. And, it's unfortunate that there's going to be victims that pass. No. They know that they're more than likely, it hasn't been successful yet. So, odds aren't in their favor. And they know for sure people are going to die during this time. And they are willingly preferably, intentionally,
intentionally.
preferably going through with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to force a resolution one way or the other. So if the bankruptcy was successful, they get to decide how much money they put into this other entity, this division, and that's the amount of money that gets divided up in the bankruptcy.
So they decide how much money that's going to the victims.
Exactly.
No conversation going on.
No, I mean, and that's so with talc, they put in, one amount, and then they tried, maybe if we put in more, it's going to fly, and it didn't either time. But so that's what they want to do. And here, so the other angle though is if there's this big delay. Again, nobody wants the delay. And these plaintiffs, I mean, they've had these cases pending sometimes for years already. I mean, again, it puts pressure on. Would I rather have less money today? Or, if we're talking about I get in my case to trial or settlement in the next year, I'm holding out. Now you're telling me it's going to be 3 or 4 years. Maybe I'll take a hell of a lot less money to get it now.
I mean, they're essentially holding these cancer patients hostage,
right?
To these attorneys too, because these attorneys are going to have to explain this to their clients. Have their clients who are, some of them going through chemotherapy, some of them in the hospital. Hopefully some in better conditions, but they're going to have all the wide variety going to them and pleading their case. And that's the intention of the defense, right?
Yeah,
is to get these uncomfortable conversations going and get the pressure and the heat turned up.
Well, put the pressure on, absolutely. And I mean, I can tell you that I've had cases where, we'd get whatever their top dollar offer was on a case. And I would say to the client, this is ridiculous. We know that we can get more than that. They're lowballing you, hold out. But there are some times where people are just like, I can't take it anymore. I don't want to wait. I don't want to go through this. It's already been however many years. I want to take this offer. And ultimately, that's up to the client to decide. Mm-hmm. And I have had cases where people have insisted on taking what I thought was not the fair value of their case because of the delay and the time that would be involved. And so that's what's happening here.
So they're going for it. It makes sense that they're going for it. I mean, it's not only is it characteristic of Monsanto / Bayer, but also with how deep of a hole that they've dug themselves in, it makes sense that they want to move to a shallower hole.
So try to drag themselves out of the trenches. Yeah. I mean, and like, we've talked about this before. These are high dollar cases. They're getting slammed with multi-billion-dollar verdicts. To be fair, the plaintiffs are not winning all of the cases. Bayer has won some. Individual juries may have different opinions, but they've gotten hit hard and with high dollars. And again, on those cases, they are appealing them. Yeah. More delay and fighting them and trying to get back into court. But ultimately, they're going to be paying out a lot of money here, one way or the other. And so, what would make most sense is to stop playing games, put a reasonable amount of money on the table, come to, a global resolution that all sides, and again, they always say, like with a settlement, a successful settlement, nobody's happy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the plaintiffs are taking less than they want, but not taking the risk, and the defendants are paying more than they want, but again, not taking, the risk. Yeah. So, that's what should be happening, and especially with as long as this has been going on. But
well, so I'm assuming moving forward, we'll see what these discussions look like. I mean, when they go to court for this, there's no plaintiff, right? Like, there's no defense or plaintiff per se. It's bankruptcy court, right?
Well, yeah, so they just file bankruptcy. Basically, okay. Yeah, I mean, and anybody can file bankruptcy. It's just whether or not, it flies or not. I mean, they can kick it out, and hopefully they will kick it out. But they just go in, and it's just this whole process of, here's what you file. You have to list all of your assets. And again, all of these things, I mean, it takes a really long time. I mean, there's various deadlines that come along, but it buys them a lot of time and at least a couple of years, if not more.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were excited to tell the shareholders, and the shareholders were excited to hear, like, hey guys, don't worry, we have this grimy tactic here to buy us an extra few years before we get hit by another few $1 billion in cases.
But, a lot of shareholders too would just like to have the thing wiped out off the plate, resolved, and and a settlement might be good for all sides. So we'll see. But these are cases again. We are still taking these cases. I mean, most firms are. There's certainly still viable cases. There will be, some resolution to this thing. And again, this is one of those situations where people are getting diagnosed all the time.
Yeah.
They may have been exposed years ago, but they don't get the diagnosis until now, and that's when their case becomes a viable case. So we're going to see these cases keep coming in.
Well, hopefully they just outlaw this entire Texas two-step attempt. Like, it is just insane. It's insane to me that it's still allowed, and that the absurdity of whether or not they think they can get away with it, but the intentions behind it and the fact that those intentions are allowed to happen, crazy. But yeah. don't want to hang on that one too long. Other updates.
So this is a big one, and we actually hinted at this on our Showard Law call the other day. There's the first verdict has come out in the NEC cases. So these are the baby formula for preemies that has been found to significantly increase the risk of a condition called NEC, which is necrotizing enterocolitis.
Yeah, I remember this. The necro, I remember
it means death. I mean, basically, your insides are dying. Your GI system is dying, and that's what happens to these babies when they are preemie. They do not have as developed of a system as a full-term child or full-term baby, and when you use cow's milk, that can really mess with their system. Mm-hmm. And so these formulas do use cow's milk, and so it's up to like 40% more likely for a baby to have this condition. And the condition is oftentimes fatal, and if it's not fatal, it still is just horrendous. I mean, multiple surgeries, permanent limitations, if not death.
Well, also how easy it is to avoid. Right.
Right. I mean, and they don't warn. And so this case, it was $60 million.
$60 million for an individual case.
$60 million. So it was one individual case. It was a state court case in Illinois, and it involved, it was a set of twins, and one of the babies passed away. And one of the interesting things about this verdict, I mean, $60 million, that's a big hit. That's the jury's serious. They want to tell the manufacturer, not cool, bad. But the attorneys, they only asked for $25 million. I mean, only $25 million is a shit ton of money, but the attorneys asked for $25 million, and the jury went back, and they were only back, I think, for it was 2 or 3 hours, and they were like, no way, we're not giving you 25. We're giving you 60.
Over double. Wow. That's insane. So that is a massive, massive statement. And I think when we first discussed this, we kind of knew that once these types of cases went to a jury, that it was going to be in the favor of the plaintiffs, because I mean, you get some of these newborn infant stories to a jury. It's tough stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they're very sympathetic cases, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that they don't warn on, and what they're doing is this formula is being fed to the babies in the hospital, and so the hospitals don't know, the doctors, the nurses. I mean, these products have been on the market and they've been advertised. They're this wonderful company and they're taking care of the babies and saving young babies, and they're not warning. And there are alternatives. There are, I mean, first of all, there's breast milk, but there's donor breast milk, and there's actually another formula that is made with breast milk. So there are options, and they're not telling anybody that this is a risk, that it's a significantly increased risk, and that there are other options. So they don't have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, what's really crazy is not telling the nurses or the doctors and the surgeons. I mean, these people that are going to be caring for these infants in the most important time, I would assume, like health-wise in their life, right? I mean,
their most critical time. Yeah. I mean, it's, in a preemie, I mean, it's touch and go as it is. I mean, they're very high risk.
So I actually was thinking of this question earlier this week, and it kind of connects to this a little bit, because really all of these cases they're based around the lack of warnings, where if they appropriately warn their customers, their patients, of what the risks are and what could happen for taking these drugs or for using these medications, products, whatever it is, then they're okay. I mean, obviously there's some situations out there where if it's crazy, right, like they're not okay, but generally if they warn, they're okay. It's crazy to me just how many of them choose to not warn. And I know there's situations where they don't know, but then they find out and they still don't warn.
Right.
And in a lot of those situations too, it's not like it would really, it seems like from my POV, it would change much on sales. Like a lot of these drugs, for example, the AIDS one, they had I guess that's different because they had a second drug, but
Right.
a lot of these drugs, they already have the patent. They have like market share. They have all of the control that they want. Adding in one other symptom, one other like disease, is that really going to change that much for how much risk there is with these lawsuits?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so just kind of first step is that a lot of the cases are failure to warn, but there are other legal theories as well, like negligent design and that sort of thing. And so, in that, like with a lot of the actual products, but most of them are failure to warn. And you're right, they could just include that, but and usually you'll find this, once you get a discovery that they did debate and consider it. And so one example that I would give you is the Actos cases. And so this was a diabetes medication that caused bladder cancer. And the thing about that is that there was a lot of competition in the diabetes market. Always has been, always will be probably. So if this one causes cancer and the rest don't, that is a big red flag, and doctors aren't going to prescribe it in all likelihood. So that's one, the C word. Sense. They always said, don't say the C word.
Yeah. But I guess like with the hair straighteners too, where we've talked about that, that's something, who goes to CVS and looks for like all of the warnings on a box? No one fucking does. If you added an extra warning on your hairspray can, like, is that really going to change sales that much?
Well, you might, and other companies might start saying, we don't use this, which they do now with the hair straighteners. Yeah. And that happened also with the denture cream. They as soon as people started getting wind that the zinc was a problem, certain manufacturers would say zinc free on the thing. So it can become a problem. But I agree with you in general that when you're listing like 8,000 symptoms, everything from your butt itches. I mean, it's ridiculous what they list, and you throw one more in. But again, on something like this, where, death of a baby. Yeah,
this is definitely unique. And also, I think a lot more competitive, right? Like people, especially when it comes to newborns and babies, people are willing to spend extra money on their babies and their animals. Fact, just the way it is. So if there's something that's like, oh, you have to pay an extra few dollars for this formula, but it reduces the chances of getting this killing disease by 40%, people will do that for babies. So in this one, I don't agree with it, obviously, but I still understand it a little bit more compared to like these other drugs that it feels like it wouldn't make as big of a difference. But I guess they probably know more about marketing and marketing.
Well, they certainly it's something that they consider, and for whatever reason they decide not to. I mean, but if you think about like talc. I mean, what are they? Again, I mean, you don't want to say. I mean, the whole promotion and the whole image of the product is that it's squeaky clean and it's it's healthy and clean and pristine, but it'll give you cancer.
Yeah, those situations where it is literally doing the exact opposite of what they're advertising. Okay, I can see why you don't want to throw in a warning.
Yeah, well, and I mean, anyone where you've got that big C word or the big D word for death, right? I mean, those are some pretty big red flags.
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, I see all those online TV ads for drugs, which actually would be a great, honestly, topic conversation on another episode, is whether or not advertising for drug companies should be legal.
Well, that was a big fight to allow direct to consumer ads, and they were successful. And I think that, but with limits, and of course, one of those limits is all of the that certain you have to say certain warnings, and it's just so funny because it's like the sing-songy voice while there are people romping in the fields with lilacs and they're happy and they're kissing and they're like, oh, and it might kill you and cause cancer and make you miserable for the rest of your life.
You might have to sacrifice your firstborn child.
But they say it in this like sing-songy voice, and they've got music overlaid, and I mean, I'm sure they're taking it to exactly the limit of what they are legally required to do, the very minimal.
Yeah, I'm sure with the speed too. The speed where they speed it up with how fast it goes through, because there's no way someone actually talks that fast, right? Like unless they have Marshall Mathers, Eminem in the booth reading out all of these side effects and symptoms. I don't think anyone's rapping off all of these side effects that fast. Anyways, that's probably a conversation for another episode. I don't want to get too off topic
certainly.
Here.
But I mean, so the important thing about this is that it's the first verdict, and there are a lot of these cases. There are cases that are spread around in state courts, and then there's also the MDL. And in the MDL, there have not been any actual bellwethers, but they are scheduled to begin this year, but there aren't dates. So there's about 450 cases in the MDL, and then I think several hundred cases in state courts.
So what does it look like for these MDLs and the bellwether cases when there are already individual cases like this one that really speak volumes to the condition, the victim, and how the jury is going to take it? I mean, does that change what the plaintiff and defense think about the bellwethers coming up when already there's this one that they got more than double what they were asking?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have a case, whether it's within the MDL or outside of it, I mean, it's a sign.
It is.
Oh, yeah, and there were a lot of people sitting in on this case and watching this case and, bated breath because, the first one really does, it does have a big impact. And this is, again, very extreme where they, only ask for, I mean, I hate to say only 25 million. 25 million is a whole lot of money.
But comparatively
but
to 60.
That, and then the jury was like, no, we're giving you 60.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, first out of the gate bellwether that really speaks volumes. And I think it gets a lot of people very excited about these cases. I think we're going to see more cases coming in because, there's always a risk. And I mean, still there, Abbott is putting out statements right and left, or Johnson is putting out statements right and left saying, we still believe in our product. We think it's the safest option. I mean, they fought it. They had their experts testifying that they didn't think that the risk was significantly increased. But obviously, the jury didn't believe that, didn't buy that.
And last week, I think it was last week, where we were talking about jury questions and how it can give you a lot of insight on maybe retrials or what to focus on later in the case, whatever it may be. How does that apply to this situation as well, where there are bellwethers coming up? There is the MDL. There's a lot of cases out there. Do attorneys look at this case and say, wow, they got more than double what they were asking, and they focused on these aspects of the case or these injuries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why, there were lots of people sitting in watching this.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm sure that they polled the jury. I'm sure that whichever jurors were willing to speak with them, they got lots of information about what were the pluses and minuses. And that's the other thing, too, about the plaintiff's bar is that even if it's not part of the multi-district litigation, we're very good about sharing with, other attorneys with the same types of cases. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of the advantages of the MDL is that you are all working together. You're all sharing, your expertise, your experience with these individual cases. And each case, both sides learn from each case.
Yeah.
What the jury liked, what they didn't like. And so both sides can kind of tweak it and hope for a better result next time. Although I don't know how much better we could get on our side.
No, I think that's as good as you can get. But I think it's a fascinating look at the kind of the back end of things, because I don't think, at least I had never really thought about what it took on the back end of attorneys, how many attorneys are involved, how many victims, how many cases. I mean, the size of this is massive, and what it actually looks like on the back end when you're planning for these individual cases, and especially when it comes to like these bellwether and the individual ones where what direction it goes into, how successful, the amount that is being rewarded or reduced, it is massive for thousands or hundreds, if not thousands of cases out there.
Yeah. And I mean, and this isn't a huge MDL at this point. Like I said, there's about 450 cases. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's a horrendous injury. I mean, you're taking, the population of the babies down to the preemies, down to the preemies, who then get NEC and have, well, actually, if you get NEC, it is horrendous. And then people who are willing to litigate, who are willing to contact an attorney, because again, when you lose a baby, this is very, very devastating. And I've had clients with all types of injury who just said, I'm just not litigious, and I don't want to get up on this on the stand and have to talk about my hip replacement. Well, can you imagine getting up and talking about losing your baby?
Yeah.
I mean, then other people too feel almost the opposite, where they're like, I want justice for my baby. I want I want other people to know. I want to protect other babies. I want to make sure that this stops. So, but that can go either way. And so, this isn't going to be one where there's hundreds of thousands of cases.
Yeah. Well, I almost feel like it's worse to be in like this third boat that they just don't know. Like, I think that there's probably a lot of parents out there that were recommended this by the doctors, by the nurses, because they weren't told. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But it did, you know, their preemie did get this disease, and they did take this formula. Yeah, it did take the formula. And they have no idea that there could be a connection there. That's what's like really sad.
Well, and you know, babies can get NEC even if they don't have cow's milk formula. It's just that it's much, much more likely. So the doctors aren't saying, "Oh my gosh, this could be related to the formula."
Just say you're saying, unlucky. Sorry.
This was a really unfortunate situation. Yeah. And again, it's what the hospitals have. You know, and kind of stepping back and another level, the companies provide this to the hospitals pretty much free of charge, because what happens is whatever. I mean, it's like when I got Bauer from the Humane Society. Whatever food they were feeding him there, I was going to buy that same food. Same thing. I mean, the hospital gets this food for free.
You get a baby, they give you food to feed the baby.
You continue to buy that food. Yeah. I mean, you were like, well, these people know what I should be feeding my baby or my dog.
And then they turn 16, and you're like, wow, he's still eating the same food. What the hell's going on here? This must be some really good baby food.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, I think we should probably keep on going there. Updates? Any other updates?
Yeah. So another one. This is kind of a quickie, but we talked about those AirTag cases where people were suing Apple because people were able to stalk them, exes and that sort of thing, were able to stalk them with the AirTag, which is kind of who knew how this was going to go. They did just survive a motion to dismiss. The case is moving forward. Again, we don't know if it will ultimately be successful, but what Apple was trying to argue was that, you can't come after us for somebody who misuses our product. Like, our product wasn't supposed to be used to stalk your ex and then murder them. It was supposed to be used to put on your wallet.
To just stalk, not murder.
To stop at the
Yeah. You took it one step too far, buddy. Okay, we'll take the.
You ruined it for everybody. Exactly. It was all fun and games still. Yeah, but it was supposed to be used so you don't lose your keys or your wallet or something along those lines. So what they tried to compare it to was, there was a case a ways back where somebody was using their smartphone while they were driving. They were watching a video, and they tried to sue Apple because the phone is playing videos, and they said no. That's a good one. It is kind of good. But they said no. A smartphone serves a great multitude of functions, one of which is videos, and it's only incidental to any of those functions that a user would be distracted and crash their car. But the sole function of a tracking device is to track location. And so the injuries arise directly from them tracking, from the tracking device being used to track.
Yeah.
So they said that it is different. It would go forward. And one of the issues here is that what steps could they take to prevent this from happening? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and I didn't know this, but so that the company can provide notifications to somebody on their devices if there's an AirTag tracking them. So they say, hey, there's an AirTag tracking you.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I guess so
you could connect an AirTag to a device. Because I was envisioning this, you connect the AirTag, like if I'm trying to stalk Christina, my girlfriend, for some reason, I attach an AirTag to my phone so I can see where
you put the AirTag on like her car or in her purse. Yeah, but I can see it on my phone.
It's connected to my phone.
Correct.
And then, so why would... So it's not connected to any of her devices.
Well, it's not, but it can. But her phone could detect it
and say there's one near you.
Right, just like your phone can, and so it should send her a message.
You're being stalked.
Well, there's an AirTag tracking.
You've had an AirTag on you for about 3 weeks straight. There's something going on.
And so they say that they do this, although I don't know that apparently not. They're saying that
sometimes I'll do, like with AirPods, I get that notification like, oh, Christina's AirPods are nearby.
Right. So exactly like that. But I mean, maybe they need to have better, it needs to pop up like some big thing. And you could disable it. Say, if you know that if this is yours, because we get those things all the time, when I don't know, order something online, if this is you, click here and we'll stop telling you about it. But if it's not you, then you should know you are.
Seems like a fair warning. Fair idea.
So I think that they need to do that. So anyway, I mean, I find that really I don't know. I find this one kind of interesting. And, some of the stories we've talked about have been really horrendous, literally involving, crazy exes stalking and killing people.
So the only comparison I could think in my head is with the AirTags. Their argument was that it is a tracking device and it is being used to track people, and that's kind of the connection there of that it is partially at fault, or at least there's a reason to believe it could partially be Apple's fault. Couldn't you make something like that similar argument with alcohol and drinking and driving, where it's Bud Light, I slammed a 12-pack while I was driving, or I went and drove after slamming a 12-pack, I got drunk, crashed my car, Bud Light, what the hell, why do you do that? And you are drinking. Whenever you drink, you're drinking to get intoxicated.
Well, people would argue that. I agree, but people would argue that. But I think the difference there is that, there are a lot of regulations on alcohol now. And one of the things is if you look on, there's constant warning, don't drink and drive, and they have campaigns talking about don't drink and drive, and that it should be only used,
Yeah, maybe that's a bad example because it is so overly
But I think that the only reason that there are all of these warnings is that, that there didn't used to be.
Yeah, that right? argument was
And so
made.
you saw that it was a problem. And yes, obviously the alcohol industry knows that some people do, but what they say is, well, they're breaking the law. You can use our product and not break the law. But
same thing with AirTags, no? Stalking, I guess stalking is illegal.
Stalking is illegal, yes. But,
I don't know.
But tracking is not. If you're tracking your suitcase
if
or
you're tracking
your dog,
another human that doesn't know you're tracking them,
but they're saying, well, we didn't make that for that. We made it so that you wouldn't lose your keys.
I don't know. It seems like a lot of semantics here. A lot of
well, that's law. Law is a lot of semantics.
Threading the thread, I guess.
Well, and that's and so that it's. I do think it's an interesting case, and we don't know what's going to happen. They tried to kick it out right at the first stage. That didn't happen. So both sides get to make their arguments, and we'll see what comes of it. But ultimately, it all comes down to what is reasonable. What is reasonable for a company to do? What is reasonable for us to expect them to do to protect us? And I like the idea of, like you said, if I'm near somebody else's, iPods or AirPods or things, it pops up and they're near. Do you want to use these? Do you want to connect to them? Do you want to disconnect? And so, if you have the option to block it, perhaps that should happen, and I just can't imagine that's that hard.
No, I don't know. Maybe.
I just think any of this. Apple can make and create, develop anything in the world. I think, and certainly they could develop a way to block to say, hey, you're being tracked. Do you want to block it?
Yeah. Well, I think this case, like you said, it's interesting just because when you start getting into what is reasonable, that's where the debate happens, and that's where attorney skill really comes out, right? In the courtroom, what is reasonable? What's reasonable use or individual's use of it? Well, I'm surprised that made it through. I honestly thought that was going to get shot down in the early stages.
I kind of did too, but then as I read this article and kind of the arguments, it was making sense to me.
Yeah.
And and again, you have to kind of weigh the risks and the benefits and, the severity of the injury. And being stalked is a pretty significant extreme thing. So what you need to do to prevent that is a little bit higher than, something that's maybe not as big of a deal.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I didn't think about it like that. Well, let's keep on chugging along here.
Keep chugging. So we talked last week about Maryland was the first state that had gotten completely rid of the statute of limitations for child sex abuse.
Yep.
Hot topic, top of mind for me because I'm in the process of submitting the Boy Scout claims. And man, it's hard. Again, I've already done the bankruptcy claims, but going through the details of these claims are just, it's excruciating. Horrific things, and then the damages and the lifelong issues that people are dealing with. So there's a case that just came out this week, a big verdict. This was in New York, and New York has extended their statute of limitations to age 55.
Wow.
So somebody has, So again, normally statute of limitations start to run when you turn 18. Many states, Arizona has a 2 years, so normally like a car accident or something, if you were underage, you would have until your 20th birthday to file. But they're very different issues with child sexual abuse oftentimes, more often than not, people aren't able to come forward until they're adults and have really addressed some of this. So extended to age 55. And of course, as a result, many cases that were not viable before could not be filed because the statute had run, are getting filed. And there was a verdict, a $5.4 million verdict in New York. And this was against the principal of a Catholic school who had been sexually assaulting individuals, and this was the man who brought the case was assaulted when he was 12 years old, was a student at the school. And, again, horrible stories. The guy, is assaulting him, in the church, threatens that he'll go to hell if he tells anyone about the abuse.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Using religion, too, in it.
Oh, yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not that unusual. He's now in his 30s and has said that these sexual assaults destroyed his life and he had tried to commit suicide. But the positive here is that, again, he is in his 30s and he was able to bring this case, bring this individual to justice, be compensated. Again, no amount of money is going to compensate or make up for it, but it will help him get the treatment that he needs and that sort of thing, because the statute of limitations had been extended. And as we talked about last week, a number of states are looking at, extending or doing away with those statutes.
And so otherwise, in this case specifically, it wouldn't have been able to be brought into court because,
Right.
Okay, wow.
Right.
Well, it is a great step in the right direction. I think, we're both on the same page here that we don't think there should be statute of limitations for these
some
type of
things,
cases.
yeah.
I think this is, like I said, a good step in the right direction, a good kind of gray area, because I think that there are obviously going to be entities out there that are going to argue that no statute of limitations is too much. At least 55 years is better, right? And it's giving someone justice. I just finished a documentary today, actually, All Quiet on Set. It came out yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago.
About it.
Yeah, it's about the sexual abuse endured by Nickelodeon cast members.
Oh my!
Yeah, Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of cases against like some of the higher up execs and directors and all of that, and almost like not. Casting couch is. I want to say it's dramatic, but it's almost not. Like it is like pretty bad how gruesome it can get, and I guess it's what we almost expect of Hollywood these days, but to see it in the more children's area.
Well, as I say, Nickelodeon is really aimed towards children. Are we talking about like child actors?
Yeah, child actors.
Yeah.
Child actors and iCarly, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101. Those were like my bread and butter. Those were my shows back in the day, my favorites. And they had a lot of the actors actresses come up and talk about their experiences with the execs and just everything.
I haven't heard about that. So are they filing lawsuits or?
Well, so I think part of it was more bringing a light to it because there were two individuals that did have lawsuits. I don't know their name. I don't remember their name specifically. Both of them had lawsuits and are kind of like out of the industry now. And those lawsuits were public. However, the victims in it were anonymous since they were minors. And then this documentary came out and kind of like exposed all of the stuff that was anonymous. So, for example, one of the victims was Drake Bell, who was in Drake and Josh, who was like a huge actor. When he was like the kid's actor when I was a kid.
Everybody wanted to be Drake.
Yeah, literally everyone wanted to be Drake. He was like this cool kid you saw on TV, and then little did we know that he was going and suffering and struggling with this stuff on the back end, and none of his co-stars knew either. It was because it was all anonymous, and he was like a Nickelodeon A-list celebrity.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really sad. I think since the Me Too, like you said, it's almost you know that it happens, and the whole story is of casting couches over the years, and people look the other way. But and this is minors, this is children. Yeah. It's horrible for anybody to have to go through that. And there were issues with some of the timing on the adult cases. So hopefully with these cases and the states having more open statute limitations, again, people will be able to come forward. Because, the thing that I find too is that the downside to it being anonymous, or there only being, information about a couple, people are afraid to come forward. But once people are successful and other people open up about it, that's what Me Too is, right? Yeah. I mean, somebody comes forward and then everybody says, Me Too, Me Too, Me Too. And maybe there are people who experience this as minors who are going to come forward now that this documentary is out.
Yeah. Well, it's good that New York extended statute of limitations. Hopefully we see other states do the same. And hopefully we hear of more cases where people that previously were unable to seek justice are now able to have their day in court. Because I think that it's massive. It's going to be massive for a lot of people.
Well, and I think also just that there's so much more publicity and so much more acceptance and so much more support for people who have been victimized, that I think there are more people wanting to come forward. And then they get the support they need. They get the counseling. And then they're told, well, that's all nice and good, but it's too late to take legal action. So, I mean, I think it's a real wave that's happening, and and it's showing up in different ways. The statute's being extended or done away with entirely, and just the fact that there's documentaries being made, and that the people who have been victimized want to help others enough to actually come out and talk about what happened to them.
Mm-hmm. We are kind of coming to the ending part of our show. Is there anything you wanted to focus on specifically, make sure we brought in here?
Not necessarily. Maybe one other update, because we have talked about these a few times, and that is that there has been another death with a Brazilian butt lift.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was thinking, I've seen a lot of things coming up with different types of malpractice cases. I think it might be interesting to do a show on that. It's not technically a drug or a product, but it is an area of law that we have, that we've been involved in and can be involved in. But these Brazilian butt lifts are really pretty extreme and crazy, and it's like Florida, it's like a destination. People are going there. And this is a really sad one. A 33-year-old mother of 5 from Tennessee traveled to Coral Gables, Florida, for this procedure, and literally died.
Wow.
Died 2 hours into the procedure.
Jesus, 2 hours. I was thinking this was like she went home or something.
No. During the procedure, the doctor punctured her liver, her bladder, and her intestines.
My God, what the fuck was this guy doing? Jesus.
Well, so that's the crazy thing, is he wasn't even supposed to be performing surgeries. I mean, he was a doctor, but he was not certified for cosmetic procedures. He was supposedly like the medical director, but he had said he wasn't going to be performing the surgeries. And on this date, he had performed procedures on 7 patients in a row. His first one started at 6:32 a.m. So at 6:32 in the morning, he's starting to his first Brazilian butt lift, and he begins operating on this patient at 8:31 p.m. after like 14 hours. And again, this is like, so many people, I guess, want this, and they're trying to keep the costs down. So it's like it's like this assembly line. Yeah. I mean, butt after butt after butt, and these doctors are incompetent, not qualified. And it is riskier than one would think. We've talked before, you can end up with air embolisms. I mean, even qualified doctors are seeing complications and deaths. And again, we've talked about this a number of times. I mean, it's a cosmetic procedure, and people are dying. I mean, young people, 33 years old.
Wasn't there, we talked about this in the past, wasn't there some regulation going into place where they couldn't be performing this many in one day?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this guy wasn't supposed to be performing any at all anyway.
Yeah. What office is he? He's not his own office, right? Like, who's hiring this guy? Who's letting him?
Well, it's actually the name really. It was Seduction Cosmetic Center is the name of the place. I mean, which sounds like, would you go to a place called Seduction Cosmetic Center? I mean, a little.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm also just shocked at like the manner of death. I mean, liver, intestines, kidney, like aren't they on their stomach when they're doing this? Like, aren't you? Isn't this a butt thing? Like, why is it getting up in her liver?
Well, but here's the thing: they're taking the fat.
Oh, they're taking the fat from the stomach area.
From other areas and
Yeah,
then
okay.
transferring it to the butt. And it's this cannula they're poking in. And again, he's 14 hours later. I mean, maybe you're being very careful poking on those first, the first 5 or 6 patients, but then you're like, oh, I got to get through with this.
Yeah, 8:30, wants to get home, have some dinner.
I mean, it's just nuts.
It's sad. I mean, mother of 5, Jesus Christ.
I know. And so young. And I mean, again, for, a cosmetic procedure just is so sad. It's not like a surgery that you had to have and there were risks.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like most surgeries, when you go and you're a little scared, but I'm sure when she was going in, she's like, oh, I'll see you guys in a few hours, like super excited, super happy, all that.
Yeah, I'm going to look great.
Not a thought in the world that this is a risk.
Right. And I mean, there's always risks with any kind of surgery of anesthesia and that sort of thing. But, these kind of procedures, they're touted as being, quick and easy, minimal downtime, low risk. And the fact is that they're not. And there are limitations now in Florida, but one of the concerns, of course, was that then, this whole industry will pick up and move somebody someplace else where there aren't as strict regulations. But, to date, Florida has kind of been the destination to go for your BBL.
I mean, not for long with these statistics.
But wherever these people go, wherever they pick up and move their shop to, you're going to have the same. You're going to have the same problems. I mean, you need a really reputable physician. I always said, if I'm going to have a surgery, I want to make sure I'm like the first one, and and maybe a Tuesday, not a Monday, just in case they had one a weekend like you did with bottomless mimosas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also I think because I know you can get things done super cheap, right?
Yeah, and always wonder about that too. I mean, if it's too good to be true.
So I don't know if Christina would get mad at me. I don't think she would. Christina's family has gone out to Vietnam to get some procedures done in the past because it's so cheap. It's so cheap, and they've got it done. There's no problems with that. And so I think it's gonna happen either way. But in my mind, if I was getting a cosmetic surgery, especially, but honestly any surgery, anything that's going to my body, but cosmetic, and I know I'm saving for it. It's more of a luxury expense, right? Yeah. I'm gonna spend a little bit more to make sure that luxury is luxurious.
Yeah.
I don't die.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that too, because so the nail salon that I go to, the people who used to own it, I actually kind of become friends with them, and they oftentimes needed legal advice, and they knew I was a lawyer. So anyway, but they sold it because the husband had some serious dental work that he needed to have done, and they were saying that it was going to be like $16,000 in the United States or like $4,000 in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And they literally went. But again, it was very reputable dentists that they were dealing with. It's just that we really overcharge for a lot of shit in the U.S.
Disgustingly, yeah.
So, I get that happens. I always get nervous because here you sometimes hear people going to Mexico for dental work, which makes me a little bit more nervous. And I've had some people who've had good experiences, but some people who have had not such good experiences. But it is unfortunate because certain things like dental work, which is not just cosmetic, parts of it are, but some of it's really not. And, it's so expensive here. And so oftentimes insurance doesn't cover it that people, kind of get forced to, to look for alternatives.
Yeah, that makes sense. More of a systematic problem than.
Yeah. But there's a whole thing called, medical tourism.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole industry. And I think it was, Thailand is like the sex change capital of the world. And again, it's something that most often insurance is not going to pay for. And people feel so strongly that that's it's a life or death for them to be able to, be the sex that, they that they are, but that does not match with their outside body. And so a lot of people have done that. I've actually known people who've gone to Thailand, and have done very well. I'm sure that there are bad stories too. And again, you're so far from home, and
it's scary.
And it's a big surgery.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Is like any type of surgery away from home. I like being at home. I would want to. I want to come home, lay in my bed, and recover there. But you don't really have that.
Well, I would go wherever you need to go.
I appreciate that.
But I would recommend you not get a BBL.
I'm definitely not going to Miami for it. Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for tuning in and hanging out with us on this week's episode of Prioritizing Profits. I hope all of you had a fantastic week. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to throw them down in the comment section wherever you're watching this, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it is, we'll see it. If you want to shoot us a DM, you can also do that, and we'll be keeping an eye on it. If it's something a little bit more private, you want to stay anonymous, feel free to email us at podcast@showeredlaw.com. We'll keep everything anonymous. If it's a question that you want us to discuss, maybe a story, maybe an experience to help out some of our other listeners, we'll be happy to talk about it. Thank you again for everyone tuning in. I hope to see you again next week, same time, same day. Have a good one. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.